Hi everyone, it's Erin and Lila from the book Curious Bibliophiles. We are doing episode 2 of the Tiny Tidbit reviews. This time we are reviewing Alice by Christina Henry, and in that beautiful glory, I have an Alice inspired tank top on. I'm very excited about this. We do want to give a little bit of a warning, I guess, beforehand, just saying that if anyone is uncomfortable with depictions of rape, violence against women, or violence in general, you may not want to read this book. I'm not going to say that it detracts from the overall feeling of the book itself. I still really enjoyed it even though there were those things in it. So give it a chance. It really was enjoyable. That being said, Lila, would you like to describe the book, or would you like me to?
I will give it a shot. Basically, where we meet Alice, she's in a very dark place. She's in a mental asylum. This is kind of a alternate universe dystopia, a little bit steampunk, a little bit Victorian, very dark, in which she's trapped in this mental asylum next to a madman named Hatcher. Something happens in the mental asylum that gives them the opportunity to escape. And when they do, it turns out that they both have reason to seek out kind of the main overarching villain in their past, who is the rabbit. So the story is really the story of them pursuing the rabbit and trying to get to the rabbit, and they have to go through all these twists and turns to get there. And you meet a lot of really interesting characters and a lot of really creative villains. I think that the villains were some of the most interesting characters, just because of all the detail that was applied to their personalities, based on the characters that they reflected from the original Alice in Wonderland. So if you're reading this book for it to be a retelling of the story of Alice in Wonderland, I would say you may be disappointed, because I feel like it's more of an impressionistic take on it, put through the lens of this really, really dark dystopian city that they're in. With that, I think we can go into a little bit more detail about some of the characters and some of our impressions.
Before you start that, I would like to say we do have one viewer right now, like actually watching us. So, hi, one viewer. Thank you so much. You just made our night. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You wanted to talk about some of the characters.
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can start with the two main characters that the story kind of revolves around, Alice and Hatcher, and their relationship. I myself, my impression of Alice was not as strong as my impression of Hatcher. I felt like the story was really driven by him, especially in the beginning. I think in the end, Alice starts to assert her independence and starts to become a real key player in the story. But in the beginning, I feel like Hatcher, a kind of reflection of the Mad Hatter, if you will, is the one who's really driving the plot along. And it's his kind of fits of madness at times that lead to them going different places, and getting into trouble sometimes. So, I had a lot of impressions about Hatcher, and I could go on for a really long time about it. Alice, I felt like there was a good balance of her being this child kind of trapped in an adult's body and trying to figure out what it is to be independent, because she's never been independent before. Even in the beginning of this book, she's very attached to Hatcher. I think she gains a little bit more independence as it goes along. But I think this is also a journey for her of coming to terms with her really horrible childhood, her horrible past, and trying to assert herself kind of as an adult. So.
See, and I kind of felt the same way about Alice. She very, very much reminded me of a child. Even at the beginning, when she kind of meets Hatcher through the little mouse hole in their cells, she hears him on his side, and he's working out, and he's trying to stay in control of not only himself, but of his surroundings and his situation. And when, the fire and everything does happen and everyone is just trapped in their cells, she was just laying on her cot ready to, okay, well, it's time. Sure thing. Like it, whatever. She wasn't even prepared to fight. And it felt like I said, a very childish way to think about that, oh, well, all hope is gone. I quit. Whereas Hatcher was, dislocating his shoulder to break his door down to save her and to get them out. So I don't know if it was because of his madness or whatever, and the fact that he could hear like the Jabberwock awakening that caused him to do that, or if it was just because he genuinely did care about Alice and he wanted them to be able to live.
I definitely think that they formed a connection over the time that they were next to each other.
Well, they were next to each other for 10 years.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's their relationship is really complicated because you wonder if their relationship is just based on the fact that they have been connected in this way for so long, and that they're connected by their pasts and the people that have hurt them. It was interesting for me to see the relationship develop also into the second book, which we're not discussing today, but their relationship also does develop further in that book to be one that is based purely on the logistics of them being next to each other, to being something about their connection and admiration for each other. So I think it was interesting, not only as she is developing, she's also learning what it is to form a real human connection and human bond with someone, which, also takes it is kind of a love interest take on it too. But I think it's the human connection that was really, really important in this book, for her learning how to do that, because I don't think she ever had before. But yeah.
Now you mentioned like the love interest between the two of them. I kind of had the impression that it was more of a convenience love. Like, hey, you've been the only person I've talked to for 10 years. Do I love you based on that? Or do I genuinely love you because of what I've learned about you? Or, do I love you for you or just because you're the only one?
Right.
So I definitely, like, I like them as a couple. I like that they're both broken individuals and that together they seem more whole. But I definitely feel like it was more of a just, hey, there you are. You're the only one that I've, talked to or even remotely had a relationship with. I love you.
Right. Yeah. I think though that it starts that way. And then as they begin to figure out who the other person is, they grapple with that and then try to accept that. And I thought that was something, especially when Alice begins to know what she will and won't do, and know that is different from what Hatcher will and won't do. In some ways, she learns that he's a lot more cold-blooded than she is, and she asserts herself and says, no, like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to save this person. When she starts to do that, you see the admiration coming from Hatcher because that is not him. But he also admires that in her. And for her, also accepting his madness is a way of kind of fostering that connection of accepting that that's the way that he is. And those are the things that he does. So yeah, it was also interesting to see just the way that their journey had a lot of twists and turns to it. And it was interesting to see the way that the writers set this up so that they would dispatch all of these different people before meeting the rabbit, which they do. I was really fascinated by all of the villains in this story.
Yes, they were so well done.
Yeah, really, really well done.
And it went along with the entire like gothic, very dark and twisted theme. Like each individual villain was more nasty and just gruesome than the previous one. And I think that's what had me continue like reading. I was just so engrossed in that. And I'm not gonna lie, I really, really like she hyped the rabbit up so well that I was like, I cannot wait to meet this character. Like I cannot wait to finally know what happened to her as a child by this man.
Right.
To cause her to go crazy and go into this asylum, but to also cause all of these people around her and in that sort of slummy version of Wonderland to fear him as much as they did.
Right. And also, I think she hypes it up by making what Alice can achieve grow with each person that she encounters. So in the beginning, she's not really sure of what she can accomplish, and she's not really sure what her powers mean, because she does discover that she has a certain power. She doesn't know what it is or how to wield it. But with each foe, she kind of gains a little more understanding of, oh, like, this is something that I can do, or this is one
And
way.
confidence.
And confidence, yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the story was building up her confidence from zero of being a person who doesn't feel like she can accomplish anything, or who feels like her life is essentially over, to someone who can have hopes for the future, which is what she starts to do as the story goes on, and she starts to realize that she might be able to make it through this.
So with that said, there were a few inconsistencies with this book. And what I'm going to do, I actually have the page numbers written down. I'm going to read the passage in the book itself, and we're going to try and kind of talk through it, because it tells you at the beginning that both her and Hatcher have been incarcerated for 10 years, or that they've at least been neighbors for 10 years. And we're trying to get see as to what age they actually are. On page 36, if you guys do have the book and you want to, double check with me, on page 36, it tells you right after they meet Bess, which is Hatcher's grandmother. It says that until yesterday, I had not seen Nicholas's face for 23 years. When he was 17, he took to running with a bad lot. I told him I'd have none of that nonsense under my roof, and he left. So if he left it at 17 and she hasn't seen him for 23 years, including the time that he's been in the asylum or the institution or whatever, leads you to believe that this man is 40. Now, like I said, they had been neighbors for like 10 years. So on page 6, it says, Hatcher was 10 years older than Alice, and nobody ever came to see him. Deductive reasoning leads us to believe 40 minus 10 is 30. But on page 267, I told you I wrote all these page numbers down. At the very bottom of the page, it says, of all the things she'd seen, this shocked her the most. Her friend, her young and pretty friend, was gone forever. They were both 26.
It's definitely, if you can figure that out, if someone out there can figure out how that makes sense, hats off to you.
And tell us. Please tell us, because it's driving me crazy.
Because there was that inconsistency, and then there was another one that I noticed in the story. Alice is in the insane asylum because she was captured by the rabbit and abused, and she escaped. And in doing so, she carried a knife with her.
The vorpal blade.
Right. And she threw it into the river, and it disintegrates. Then, some 10 years later, when escaping from the asylum, she and Hatcher dive into the river and swim through it. So this is a river that can melt a blade, but not flesh. So that was something.
I know what it is.
You do.
Aliens.
Aliens. Yep.
It's aliens.
So, yeah, those were just a couple of things that just, it doesn't really, like, truly detract from the book as a whole, but it just kind of grates on you. And you get this little nagging thing in your head where you're like, well, is she 26 or is she 30? And now I need to know. Like, it didn't seem like a big deal before, but now if she's 26, somehow that changes something.
And I've read this a few times now. And every time I read it, I'm left sitting there thinking, it still bothers me. It's still, I don't, why? Just be consistent. Is she 26 or is she 30? I don't get it. Or is she 30 and looks 26? Like, any explanation. I don't care. I just want one.
Right. Anything you can get.
Now, earlier you mentioned that Alice and Hatcher both encounter a lot of different characters throughout this story.
Mm-hmm.
A majority of those characters meet their demise, whether it's by Hatcher, whether it's by Alice, whether it's by any other character, they all do meet their demise. And I know that you wanted to sort of talk about some of those deaths.
Right. I think the deaths were really important in signifying her reaching another step in her development, because it's her taking some of the power back that they took from her, because essentially all of the people that she killed, or the main people that she was in some way responsible for killing, were the people who participated in her capture and abuse, which is what led to her being in the insane asylum. So it's her taking back that power. Also in a like magician sort of way, it's her taking power away from these magicians, and or I don't think the walrus was a magician really.
I think he had slight power,
Right,
but wanted to consume more. And we'll kind of talk about that nasty man in a minute.
right. So I think the first person she killed was, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the caterpillar?
Correct.
Right. And I think that,
No,
no?
she kills somebody in the alleyway
Oh,
when
that's,
she's dressed as a boy, and
mhm,
her and Hatcher are trying to get to like they just left I think it's Cheshire's house.
right,
And they come up and they grab her and they were going to rape her.
right.
And Hatcher kills the really huge guy and then one of the others, and she, with her little dagger that they had given her at Bess's house,
Hmm.
stabbed him in the gut.
Okay. So maybe not the first killing, but the first of three major deaths. Um, I think, was the caterpillar the one that actually captured her, or was that, so in this, I'm trying to figure out in the story of when she was captured, it was her friend who kind of tricked her into coming, um, and then they went to a tea party with the walrus, the caterpillar, and the rabbit, correct?
Yes, I think just the like her friend got her to the party, but she was supposed to be the rabbits. Like I don't think that the caterpillar was ever supposed to have anything to do with her other than just being present at that get together, that party.
Right.
Um Originally the rabbit told Walrus
Mm-hmm.
that he was supposed to have her,
Right.
and then he kept her.
Right. So, yeah, I just think that each of these deaths is an important step for her in coming to terms with that event. Because in the beginning of it, she can't really even think about it. And it starts coming back to her kind of in waves. And so each time she dispatches one of these three people, it gets her closer to accepting what happened, and moving past it.
And
Um,
getting the reader to know
mhm.
what had actually happened, not just the little bits and broken pieces that she does tell.
Right. So in the beginning, it's really unclear about exactly what had happened to her. You know that she was abused, and that it might have been sexual, and then the details start coming to light the further along she gets. So, yeah, I think that as far as symbolism, each one of these deaths provides her with the, or it's her taking back something that was lost on that day.
And it's like I mentioned before, not always her doing it, but
Hmm.
it's always her decision.
Right.
So, she is the one that physically kills Caterpillar.
Hmm.
When you get to the walrus, she gives permission for this other character who has also been abused and forced to fight and all of these things. She gives that permission. No, this one's going to do it.
Hmm.
And even though the walrus had this history with Hatcher and with Hatcher's family and everything, even though he was the one that basically caused Hatcher to go crazy, she doesn't necessarily, he doesn't get the permission. Somebody else does. You know, she doesn't let him do it for fear that it's going to make him or take him into a darker place than he already is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, you finally get to the rabbit, and was really exciting because I definitely had waited through the entire book for this moment. You know, it's been talked up and all of these things. You're finally getting most of the story, and then she walks in, and you know, after it tells you, you know, she took his eye.
Mm-hmm.
In her escape, she managed to wound him bad enough that she took his eye. And even Cheshire mentions, you know, he lost some of his magic when he lost you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so in doing so, she managed to consume a portion of his magic, and the thing that made him the most feared person in this world, or in this at least portion of town. And she meets him, and he's just this sickly, like, old man in a wheelchair, because she was able to do that to him. And I thought that was honestly the best representation of what they could have done for the rabbit. Now, the first time I read it, I didn't agree. I was like, what? Why would they do that? And then I read it again, and I was like, I understand it. Like, I definitely agree a lot more now with what they did. And,
Yeah.
you know, in that instance, she meets her old friend, the one that led her to what caused this entire terrible thing. And her friend is the one that finishes everything. And I kind of liked that it came full circle,
Mm-hmm.
but every death was her decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's a really good observation, is that she really has control in these situations. As for the meeting the rabbit for the first time in person, I have to admit I was a little bit disappointed that it wasn't a big confrontation. But like you, I understand the value of her kind of breaking through the artifice of the legend of the rabbit, and the person that she's built up in her mind, this really scary villain that she's built up in her mind, of seeing that she took something away from him and that she has the power. So,
Exactly. Like, she spent all of those years, you know, even back at her house in the new city,
mhm,
um, just fearing for her life, and about this man. And even in the institution, she was, you know, terrified, you know, even though she felt like she was in a somewhat safe place. He still held that much power over her. And I liked to see that as she gained more power herself and more confidence, and she started to grow up a little bit more, he didn't necessarily hold that power anymore.
right. I also wanted to talk about, now we're getting towards the end. How did you feel about the confrontation with the Jabberwock? Because for me, I had, in the same way that I had built up the rabbit in my mind, I'd also built up the Jabberwock, because they have a couple of near misses with him throughout the story, where they're almost sort of encountering him, sensing his power. Hatcher has a sense of where he is, or what, you know, if he's searching or what he's doing. And I think that, you know, that all creates an atmosphere of like, this is going to be the final guy. This is going to be the final challenge for her. And for me, in a similar way to the rabbit, where I felt like, oh, that was kind of a letdown, or I felt like there was so much more that you could have done with that scene, because it's like, and then in a way I'm like, well, it is also her taking complete control over the story and being like, you want a confrontation? I'm not going to give it to you. But
I'm not gonna lie, really disappointed.
Right. Yeah, me too.
Both times I read it, I remember, I kind of tried to justify it the first time, like, oh, well, it'll be a bigger deal in the second book because they said that it was a duology.
But then it's not.
And she said it was, like, okay, there's 2 books, and I'm thinking, okay, I can justify it, it happened this way because more is going to happen in the second one. No problem, whatever. And after reading the second one and then rereading this one again, I'm not gonna lie, I'm very disappointed with it. Through a few portions of the book, Cheshire makes comments about wishes are powerful things.
Right.
That you should hold your wishes close to you, make sure you don't say them aloud.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was really irritated, like, come on. I wanted to see, even though she didn't have the Vorpal blade or anything like that, I really wanted to see her kind of, she's already grown so much and she's come so far. I wanted to see her be able to take this thing down in, a blaze of glory. And that is not what happened.
It's not what happened. And I was also thinking the writer here is just pushing off this confrontation to a later date. But spoiler alert, that turns out not to be true unless there is a third book. We both read the second book, and there was no such confrontation in it, which was also a disappointment.
And I think he was only mentioned maybe 2 or 3 times.
Right.
Now, I understand why that is, because, she does say, I want to be able to bottle you up. And when I remember you, I won't remember you. I'll be able to go, what was that?
Right.
So I get why he or it wasn't mentioned in the second book, but I don't necessarily agree with it.
Right. So, yeah, I hope that there's more to come in this series. I will read it. There are definitely some things that grated on me a little bit about this book, but I really enjoyed the style of the book. I really enjoyed the descriptiveness. I enjoyed the villains a lot. They were a lot of fun. Not literally, but it was a lot of fun just like seeing their personalities and how the writer really fleshed out their characters. And yeah, I did enjoy this book, but there were a few, like you said, inconsistencies, and a few disappointments that kind of took away from it for me. So I want to know, for me, this book, I believe I rated it a 3 out of 5. What was your rating for this?
I think I did a 4 out of 5. And I agree with all of your points. I loved the writing style, and I will definitely read more by this author in the future, and more in this maybe series. I hope maybe.
Yeah.
But there were, the ending really bothered me, not so much the rabbit, but definitely the Jabberwock. And I felt like the inconsistencies were what really held me back from giving it a 5-star rating. Because I mean, like I said, I'm still thinking about it now, and I read it, you know, months and months and months ago. So no, I gave it a 4-star. And with that said, I would like to thank everybody that watched today or will watch in the future. We are going to be doing, hopefully, 2 reviews next week. We're going to review Taryn Matherew's Summoner books 2 and 3. So we have The Inquisition and Battle Mage. And for both of those, Kevin will be present, since him and Taryn Matherew are best friends now.
They're bros.
They are bros. I hope to see you guys, you know, watching our videos for those, because we definitely do have a lot of good things to discuss. I'm very excited for those videos. Please remember, it is always okay to be book curious, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.